Wood Green Empire bullet catch. On March 23, 1918, at the Wood Green Empire in North London, the second house of the evening was playing to a full hall. The same act had already run cleanly in the earlier show that night. William Ellsworth Robinson was 56 years old, and for nearly 20 years he had been Chung Ling Soo. He was born in New York. On stage, he worked as a Chinese conjurer, and he never spoke a word of English in front of an audience. He used an interpreter for the press. He kept the character off-state as well, which meant almost nobody in London knew the man inside it. His closing illusion was called Condemned to Death by the Boxers. Two assistants in costume raised the modified muskets and took aim. One of them pulled the trigger. Powder that had worked its way into the worn part of the weapon caught behind a bullet that was never meant to leave the barrel. The shot went through his body. Blood came from his chest and from his back. He went down and said, "Oh my God, something's happened. Lower the curtain." It was the only time in his professional career that Chung Ling Soo spoke English on a stage. The curtain came down, and Dr. Porter, who was in attendance, found the bullet had gone straight through him. He was taken to Wood Green's Passmore Effects Cottage Hospital, where he died the following morning. Robert Churchill, a West End gunmaker, examined the weapons for the police. The guns were roughly 20 years old, with defective steel barrels and an extra steel tube built to hold powder charges for sound effects, and the trick worked by firing a blank from that tube while the visible bullet stayed where it was. Churchill told the inquest that small quantities of powder had found their way along the worn part to behind the bullet. Robinson had never properly unloaded the guns after a performance. He took the breeches apart instead, and unburned powder collected where it should never have been, and it had been collecting for years. The inquest also established who he was. Chung Ling Soo was William Ellsworth Robinson of New York, and the Chinese identity was an act he had kept up offstage as well as on. The jury returned a verdict of death from misadventure. The papers that carried the verdict carried the other revelation with it. The Chinese magician of Wood Green had been an American named Robinson the whole time. Howrah Bridge cage escape. On June 16, 2019, on the Hooghly River in Kolkata, a crowd had gathered along the banks beneath the Howrah Bridge to watch an escape. Chanchal Lahiri was 40 years old and worked as Jadugar Mandrake. He had built a career on Houdini-styled escapes across more than 2 decades, and he had gone into this same river once before, in 2013. They tied him with steel chains and rope, blindfolded him, and locked him inside a cage about 6 feet tall, fastened with 6 lops. A crane lowered him into the water near pillar number 28. He was expected to surface within minutes. The crowd watched the water. 30 minutes passed and there was no sign of him. The spectators on the banks started searching along the river, and police and disaster response teams took over. The search ran for about 24 hours. His attempt in the same river in 2013 had drawn protests and accusations that he had cheated it. His body was recovered on June 17th near Ramkrishnapur Ghat in Howrah, still bound in the chains. Before they lowered him in, he had told the crowd this: "If I can open it up, then it will be magic. But if I can't, it will be tragic." Empire Palace Theatre fire. On May 9, 1911, at the Empire Palace Theatre on Nicholson Street in Edinburgh, 3,000 people filled the house for the evening show. Sigmund Neuberger was 40 years old and performed as the Great Lafayette. He was among the highest-paid entertainers in Britain. His act closed with The Lion's Bride, an illusion in which he switched places with a live lion. The illusion landed. As the curtain came down, a stage lamp set the scenery alight, and it went up within minutes. The fireproof curtain jammed 3 feet from the bottom and stopped. The stage exits were locked, and they were kept that way to protect the secrets of the act. Lafayette got out of the building. Then he went back in for his horse, and he did not come out again. The audience left in good order within minutes while the orchestra played the national anthem, and not one person in the 3,000-seat house was killed. Every death was behind the curtain line. A body identified as Lafayette from his personal belongings had already gone to Glasgow for cremation. 2 days after the fire, workers clearing the understage found a second body, dressed identically. The remains at the crematorium were his stage doubles. Lafayette's own body was identified by his trademark gold rings. The official report into the fire recorded 10 lives lost. 4 days before the fire, Lafayette's dog Beauty had died. a mongrel Harry Houdini had given him as a puppy. Edinburgh City Council granted the dog a plot at Piers Hill Cemetery on one condition, that Lafayette be buried there himself one day. On May 14th, his ashes went through the city past a crowd of more than 250,000 people. He was laid in the grave beside her. Lutwyche razor blade. On July 6, 1938, in Lutwyche, a suburb on the north side of Brisbane, a father was doing the trick for his boy. Vivian Hensley was 43 years old and a Lutwyche dentist. Magic was his hobby, not his living, and the piece he was doing that day was called Swallowing the Rusty Razor Blade. The method was simple sleight of hand. He pretended to put the blade in his mouth while really dropping it down his coat sleeve. The blade didn't go into the sleeve. It went into his throat, and he swallowed it. His wife put him in the car and drove him to the hospital, making him eat cotton balls the whole way. A battery of x-rays couldn't locate the blade. Surgeons opened him up twice and never found it either. He lay in hospital 4 days and died. The Courier Mail ran it on page 1 on the 11th of July, under the headline, Lost Life by Swallowing Razor Blade. Frankfort milk can. On November 8, 1930, at a vaudeville theater in Frankfort, Kentucky, the evening bill was running. Royden Joseph Gilbert Raison della Ginesta was 52 years old and worked as Ginesta. His feature was the milk can escape, a trick Harry Houdini invented. He was padlocked into a can filled with water. A curtain was drawn across in front of him, and he was out in 2 minutes. That was the act, and he had made a living out of it. The can had been dropped before the show. The fall damaged the secret escape hatch and left it inoperable. Ginesta went into the water and the curtain closed. The hatch wouldn't give. Behind the curtain, nobody could see that anything had gone wrong, and that was the whole point of the curtain. The 2 minutes ran out. 3 people got to the can and broke it open. A physician revived him at the scene, and he was rushed to the hospital. He never recovered from the near drowning, and he died the next day, November 9th, 1930. The cause was recorded as drowning. Theatro Santa Roza gas bag. On June 12, 1900, at the Theatro Santa Roza in João Pessoa on the northeast coast of Brazil, a touring company was getting that night's show ready. John Miller was 42 years old, born in Helsingborg, Sweden, and he worked as Blackbeard. His family had emigrated to the United States when he was a boy, and he had come up billed as the boy magician. His signature piece was an illusion he had bought from a fellow performer named Harry Rouclair called The Moth and the Flame. It vanished 6 women, costumed as moths, into a candle flame. To do it, the illusion needed a supply of gas, and theaters in Latin America at the time mostly didn't have one. So Blackbeard carried his own. He bought gas bags of acetylene he could take from town to town and use to run the illusion on any stage he was booked into. He and his assistant, Lou Bartlett, were working with the bags when one of them exploded. The blast threw both men into the cast and crew standing around them, and his manager was badly hurt. Both deaths were recorded as instant. He was 42. Springfontein straitjacket run. In 1930, on a road at Springfontein, in what was then the Orange Free State of South Africa, a crowd had come out to watch. Charles Rowan worked as Carr the Mysterious. He was an escape artist, and the straitjacket was how he sold himself. They buckled him into the jacket and laid him down in the road. 200 yards away, a motor car started toward him and built to about 45 miles an hour. The escape was the entire point of the thing. He had to be out of the jacket and off the road before the car arrived. He didn't get out in time, and the car went over him. The accounts of what actually killed him never agreed. One had the car running him over and nearly taking his leg off. The other had the adrenaline stopping his heart before the car ever reached him, so that what went over him was a man who was already gone. Both versions ended in the same place. He died there, in the road, in front of the people who had come to watch him get out. Winona Lake shackle escape. On the morning of July 6, 1984, at Winona Lake in northern Indiana, the wind was up and the water was choppy. Jeff Rayburn Hopper was 23 years old and an escape artist. He was booked to perform later that day as part of the Winona Lake Bible Conference, and that morning he was rehearsing it. They put him in handcuffs and chains, and he went into the lake about 100 yards from shore. He worked his way out of the chains, then out of the handcuffs. He had beaten every restraint they put on him. and then he called to his assistant for help. The wind was too strong for the assistant to reach him in time, and he drowned in about 6 feet of water. The death was recorded as a drowning. The New York Times reported it on July 8, 1984. Blackbeard's Family Fun Center burial. On October 31, 1990, at Blackbeard's Family Fun Center in Fresno, California, a Halloween crowd had gathered around an open grave. Joseph Burris was 32 years old and performed as the Amazing Joe. He idolized Houdini. He had 2 boys at home, Joe Jr., who was 13, and Joshua, who was 10. He was doing the stunt to raise money for the 3rd floor, a Fresno drug rehabilitation facility, and he came to it in a white limousine, in a white tuxedo and white patent leather shoes. He was sealed into a clear plastic coffin and lowered into the grave. He knocked from inside and told his assistants the chain around his neck was too tight. They loosened it. He gave them 2 thumbs up. They shoveled about 3 feet of dirt over him. Then, a truck poured in about 3 feet of wet cement. The dirt and the cement together came to roughly 7 tons. The truck pulled away, and the whole thing dropped about 2 feet. The crowd heard the coffin shatter. They dug. Sean Henderson, one of the helpers, said the cement busted the coffin the moment they finished. The coffin was plastic glass, and there were no steel reinforcing rods in it. A piece had come off it earlier, and Burris had glued it back on with glue he bought at a hardware store. He hadn't practiced the stunt in advance. He built no mock-ups. He never tested the casket's strength by loading it with sand. Fresno County Coroner David Haddon ruled that Burris died of asphyxia caused by compression of his chest. Joe Jr. said his father got out of the coffin. He made it out. He just didn't have a chance to get out of the grave. Stories like this come out regularly. Subscribe to keep up and suggest the next topic in the comments.